Kevin, welcome. It is such an honor and a joy to have you on today.
Thank you, Heidi. Yeah, I'm glad to be here. And when I saw your invite, I was like, oh, fantastic. Yay, this is exciting. And I every time we do chat, it's a fantastic conversation. So I'm looking forward to this one.
You and I met in a voice booth, right?
We did, yes.
That's our other life,
Yes,
our other life, our special life. And I was so intrigued when I read up on you a little bit more to find out that you started off as a singer and a voice artist. Tell us just a little bit about that part of your life and then the crossover to what you're currently doing. And then I'll sing your praises after that.
Yeah, so I've always been intrigued by human behavior and why people do what they do. And in my younger years, I was like, I need to find options of other than studying psychology for 12 years and at what that would be. In my 20s, became an NLP practitioner and timeline therapist and hypnotherapy. So you do your certifications in those. But I was still too young to be coaching anyone. I had no life to to be able to coach.
Yes, we need a bit of life experience.
Yeah, so I didn't kind of use it in my 20s, and then life happened, and eventually my coach said to me, well, why don't you've got this voice experience, you've been on stage, you do voice of work, why don't you just teach people what you know? And I was like, I don't know what I know. And he's like, well, use that, Kevin. You've got the NLP, you've got this voice, you've got this ability to be behind a camera and use your voice and, being on stage. And I was like, oh yeah, I think I can do that. And I kind of formulated a presentation skills course. Used Gumtree in those days. It still works, but Gumtree.
Yes, I remember Gumtree. Yes,
yeah, and used that for my marketing, and got my first client from Nedbank, who was an executive. And I was like, oh wow! And we had, because of the NLP, because of the processes that you can go through, it changed so much for her. And then I realized, oh wow, I've got something here that I can put into action in many areas. And it just grew from there and became an actual business. And 10 years later, that's what I do. I work with corporates. I work with businesses, executives, designing and implementing processes and programs for businesses. Yeah.
And I saw that you have done over 750 workshops. And guided and helped and enlightened over 6,000 people.
Yeah.
How does that make you feel? Because that is astounding.
It is. What I went and did when I first got to those numbers, I was like, well, if I look back at the programs, if I look at all the workshops that we've done, and that's just workshops that I have actually been invested in. So I've also collaborated with other people on other workshops and other environments.
Yes.
And then you put all of that together, you go, oh my goodness, there's a lot of information that's been shared. There's a lot of places that I've ventured into. And I think this is one mistake that we make as humans is we obviously look at our current situations very often and kind of go, oh, well, this is my life. Until you sit back and go, well, let me take stock of what my life is. And what have I done and who have I worked with and what does that look like? And go back on testimonials and clients and your client list, and suddenly all of that creates this enormous portfolio of evidence. And then you go, oh wow, I've been part of that. I've been part of that. And anything from coaching to facilitation to training, all of it, culminates into this big thing. And you go, well, and the one thing, Google runs a campaign called I Am Remarkable, #I Am Remarkable.
Yes.
And one of their slogans is, if it's factual, it's not boasting. And when I first read that, I was like,
beautiful, yes.
Well, factually, these are my clients. Factually, I've worked in, these environments. Factually, I've done this. So then it sort of changes how we perceive our own kind of approach to what we'd like to share with people and what we put out into
Yes.
public domain. Because factually, those are the things I've done. And truthfully, that's, how many people I've worked with, how many companies I've worked with.
Yeah,
And
and it's right there. The evidence is right there.
yeah,
That's beautiful. And just now that you're talking about taking stock, I was thinking, how important is it that we do take stock for the good reasons, but also the less good reasons in life, right?
yeah. Yeah, and also, I think part of that process is it builds a wonderful case study for you to look at your life and kind of go, well, how am I doing? What are you doing? And well, if I have this as my evidence and my portfolio, how do I go from that and grow from that?
Yes.
And very often we, and good and bad. And that's, it's important to kind of go, well, these are the things that worked. These are the things I want to do less of, or that make me feel less like I'm coming alive, and focus and lean into what makes you feel like you're coming alive, right? Like this conversation.
Yes. Thank you kindly. So you've literally and figuratively helped people to find their voice, their truth over so many years. What do you find is often misunderstood when it comes to having your voice? We all want to be heard. We all want to speak our truth. What is there that people need to know about that?
I think it's gonna sound strange, but I think even more now than ever before. It falls in line with alignment.
Mm.
And alignment for me is specific to me, right? The question
Yes.
is, are you aligned with you? And that comes to, your value system, your needs as a human. Like, what do you need to fulfill? Is it aligned with what you're doing? Is it congruent with everything you're putting into your life? Are the relationships aligned? So I think finding your voice is it's a very vague kind of a process, but when you really break it down, you kind of go, it really starts signifying fundamentals to who you are. And when you start living according to those fundamentals, everything feels like so much more, because when you know your value systems, you know what your needs are. You work on the supporting beliefs for whatever you want to put out into the world. When those are aligned, you also know how to put a boundary in place,
Yes.
and you know how to apply for this job or apply for that promotion,
Yes.
and all of it feels aligned. And that, I think, is what finding your voice really looks like. It's more of an internalized process than
Yes.
an external process.
Yes. And that's where the confidence thing comes in as well. To be quietly confident, you know that you know that you know what you stand for, what you will tolerate, and what you will not tolerate in your, and I don't mean that in a bad way, of course. But that quiet confidence, how does one find a quiet confidence then? How do you know that you know that you know that you're going to be okay, or that you're doing the right thing? How does that work for you?
So, probably about 8, 9, but even while I was having my business, I struggled with confidence.
Yeah.
Even though I'd been on stage, I struggled with confidence. So,
Yes.
for me, it was going, okay, well, if I'm putting this out into public domain, and I want to be able to help people, one of the things I want to be able to do is lead with confidence. And so I did a lot of research on it. And there is lots of content around confidence, but one of the things that stood out for me around confidence is Albert Bandura's process, and he looks at self-esteem, or self-efficacy at least, and self-esteem. Now, your self-efficacy is literally, are you efficient at what you can do? Can you do what you do?
Yeah.
And the thing is, very often when we have the structured processes in place and we have the work in place, and you can do what you can do. But then the second part, the self-esteem, very often relates back to how you speak to yourself.
Oh,
And
yes.
when you
Yes.
don't support your self-efficiency with your self-talk, how you speak to yourself, those two directly impact each other.
Oh,
And
yes.
suddenly you've got the efficiencies, but you don't have the self-talk, and you debilitate your own efficiencies. And for me, that was part of this process for me. It's like, oh, let me help teach, show people, research it, find it, and say, okay, cool. Here's an absolute practical process to cultivate confidence for yourself
Yes.
and get your self-talk and your self-esteem in the right place, and match that with your self-efficacy. When those two things are matching, you're actively building confidence. So then you start going, it's still an inner process, right? You've got to get the knowledge in the efficacy of what you're doing, but you also have to support it on how you speak to yourself. And if those aren't aligned, you're going to struggle.
You're going to struggle. In fact, I want to go so far as to say you can forget it. It's never going to work out. The key word there for me is process. People often feel fired up and ready to go, and they do it for a week or so and go, and then people lose interest, get tired, become despondent. So the process, it could, for some, it's faster than others. But I want to go so far as to say it's actually lifelong. I found myself today telling myself, no, Heights, don't think that, don't say that, change it. I constantly have to and want to keep myself in check, because we're kind of hardwired to want to go to the other side of the train tracks, to the negative side.
Yeah. And it's a built-in self-sabotage that we have.
Yes.
It's like, and there's a beautiful website called Positive Psychology,
Yes.
and part of that gives you a bit of assessment on how to measure, how to check your own self-sabotage, and it gives you indications of where you're doing this actively. And when we do this, it's that little voice that just says, oh, this isn't going to be good enough if I put this into public. There's this constant little sabotaging. But the moment you have the self-awareness of catching your voice, like you did today, you're like, okay, let me catch that, because that in itself is the very voice that's actually sabotaging. And when you catch it, you can learn to create a whole new belief system around how to do it better than you did it yesterday.
Yes. And again, the word process is coming in my mind, because it's not a once off. It's not a 2 times, 3 times. It's really getting into the habit of doing it.
I want to go as far as to say it's an identity. Right?
Oh, yes.
Right.
Love that.
What is the cultivated identity that you would like to pursue? Right. And in that cultivation of that processing, like you say, that constant re-engineering of the identity. If I look at me today compared to who I was 10 years ago, 15 years ago, I'm completely like chalk and cheese. Like I'm a completely different human. But part of that processing, part of that identity shifting was, how do I actively get involved with cultivating and curating an identity that I am aligned with and I feel proud of? And I don't, I catch myself immediately, even when you're driving in traffic, I don't, if I miss the turn off, or I never go, oh, Kevin, you're such an idiot. I don't use that kind of language. I refuse to do it. So I'll go, oh, Kevin, well, let's take a bit of a detour and see where we go.
Yes. Yes.
And I'll do it out loud, because my mouth is closer to my ears than anyone else's. So
absolutely.
It's
and
literally catching, yeah.
When you say something, you're such an idiot or moron, or you keep forgetting things, all of those things that we say to ourselves. First you think it, then you speak it, and then you hear it. So you're doing all these things to yourself.
Yeah.
It's such a reinforcement of that thing. And we can do very much the same, just throw it to the other side. Yeah.
I just want to add to what you're saying is, from coaching and working with people, so very often you have these ideas of like, I'm not good enough, or this isn't going to work, or whatever that negative association that we have to something. And in a process that you can actually work through a coach with, and I know you know this, but working through that process, you can actually ask, is the voice saying that? Is it your voice or is it someone else's voice?
Yeah.
And so many times we find ourselves in positions where we say things that negate ourselves. But it's not my voice. It was my mother's voice, or it was my grandmother's voice, or it was a family member. And you you go, okay, go back to that moment, go back to the first recollection of where you heard that. And suddenly you're like, oh, okay, that's not a belief you hold. It's a belief that you were taught.
Yes.
And suddenly, because that sits there, you're like, oh, wow, yes, actually, this is not my voice. And that realization shifts how we actually speak to ourselves and who we start becoming. How do we curate that identity differently?
And I love the word curate. That aside, and it's so beautiful that we are saying this to each other, because not many people know that you can curate, that you can unlearn these things. Learned behavior can be unlearned, right?
Well, it's the presuppositions that we learn in neurolinguistics, to start off with, because part of intention versus behavior. Very often people experience behavior but don't realize there's an intention attached to that. But we also ignore the intention. And when it comes to behaviors, you have to ask yourself, well, what is this intent? What is the intention of this behavior? Because the moment I step into, let me become curious about why I'm behaving this way, suddenly you might discover that, oh, I do this because I feel like this person's disregarding me. I feel like my needs are not being met. I feel like, or I don't know why I feel this way. Suddenly, just the awareness of the intention versus the behavior, you also start, as an adult, start realizing that you have more options available to you than just being at the mercy of something. And I think that's so important, Joe.
That is incredibly important. That's beautiful. We're not at the mercy.
Yeah.
There are options. And as coaches, we're making people aware of options that they may not have been aware of before. And now I'm thinking about, for instance, men, our listeners, our viewers, are taught by virtue of the fact that we're men, that you're men, and the way things were a few years ago, and maybe to some extent, and maybe even a greater extent today, that men are expected to behave in a certain way. I still feel that it's still very much so. For instance, you're not supposed to really show your emotions. You're not supposed to be uncertain. You're not supposed to say, I don't know. You're not supposed to come across as vulnerable from fear of, and we can maybe interrogate the reasons for that. How do we marry a man, a guy, a dude who is watching this, who is listening? Vulnerability and confidence. How do we get those two things to marry and to work together? Because they can both exist in the same person at the same time, right?
I think I want to start off by saying so many people, and I've seen it online a lot, saying that masculinity is there's this big drive that there's something wrong with masculinity, and so many people are unsure of what the masculine role should be. And I'm here to say, like, there's nothing wrong with masculinity. First and foremost, what's relevant currently in the world is we're being shown that masculinity is not just one thing, first and foremost.
That's right.
And secondly, part of masculinity now, because there's so much more awareness around this, means that you have the ability to say, I'm not okay. Like, and the confident, vulnerable position to hold there is to step into that role and kind of go, yeah, I'm willing to be able to talk about the thing that makes me very uncomfortable. And I'm not, going to shy away from the fact that I don't have the answers today. Right. And I think that is, it's as much as it's definitely challenging our beliefs around masculinity in a big way. What it's also doing is showing us that feminine energy and masculine energy don't have to be lesser and more than each other. They can be different energies, but there's no attack on masculinity whatsoever. And I think that's where the confidence and vulnerability part of it comes in. Brené Brown speaks about it very often. And if you look at her and you understand, leaning into the vulnerability actually means it's a strength. And, when you go and investigate it to the degree that she has, you also start realizing that not being vulnerable or not allowing for vulnerability is actually a weakness, right? Because part of you wants to protect yourself to the degree that whatever that degree is for you, to kind of say, no, I can't do that. But the vulnerable part is to actually say, I'm not okay and I don't have the answers today. And, to allow yourself to be strong in that way, because it's not a weakness to be vulnerable. And I think, there's so much evidence now to support how when leading with vulnerability, you're allowing someone else to be vulnerable too. And, I look at so many, I've seen so many examples of men in a position where they've actually cultured and curated their own identity to kind of say, well, my dad didn't do this. I want to be a dad that does this, right? And men are actively doing it, but through old belief systems and archaic kind of thinking and myopic thinking, what we've done is going, well, that's not how, men have behaved in the last 100 years. And I'm going, yeah, thank goodness that that's not how men, behave like they have, because, because we're human. And I think that's first and foremost, you're human. And with that comes emotion and being emotive. And that's okay. It's having that responsibility or the ability to respond that way. That's the beauty of creating this new masculinity in the world. It's necessary.
It's necessary. And you said something now which I find, for me, it's very, very important. We're human. And it feels to me, whether you're gay, straight, male, female, in between, whatever you identify as, you're still a human being, first and foremost. And it feels, with all the pressures from society and pressures that we put on ourselves and whatever the case may be, that people trying so hard to be this, that, or the other, to hide this, that, or the other in order to come across as this, that, or the other, that we forget that we are human beings in the first place. And your emotions are your emotions because you're a human being, not because of your orientation or your status in the world, right?
Absolutely. I think one of the sentiments that come up around being human, is just allowance. If I can't allow for that other human to exist at whatever level they want to exist in, if they choose whatever identity they do, it's like the question I have is like, so why is that such a necessary force that you want to put on someone else? Why is your masculinity in question if that person decides that they identify some other way? That's the bigger question. Not, it's got nothing to do with that person. That person's going to do their own life and ask themselves those questions. What needs to be asked is like, why am I responding to that thing? That needs to be investigated, not that person.
Exactly. Yes,
Yeah.
Your reaction needs to be investigated, interrogated. And showing up as the best human being that you can show, a human being that you can be proud of. For our purposes today, a man that you can be proud of. You have to connect with yourself. Connecting with yourself is the first step for me in connecting with others. So, for somebody who is not a coach, not a performer, who hasn't done many workshops, who is perhaps not even a leader, just the guy listening to this, how do you think, or what is a good place to start to think about connection with others?
I was just recently having a conversation with someone, and I immediately needed to kind of give some kind of analogy just to connect to that. And I used this analogy, and I said, very often when you walk into a dark room and you have a candle lit, the light will be seen. But if you don't protect the candle from a wind or an unexpected kind of danger that might be there in the dark room,
Yes.
the light's going to go out.
Yeah.
But until you protect it, until you put something around it and kind of go, okay, let me safeguard this so I can make sure that by the time I get to sharing light with someone,
Yeah.
it's still burning. And
Mm.
therefore, you can start lighting people around you, and you can start lighting more. But the first essence of being able to keep that protected is looking after yours,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
And it's a simple analogy, but I think it's so effective when you think of, I can want so much for my family, for my partner, for my friends, for my whatever, for your work environment. But if I'm not okay, right, it's going to be very difficult to light other people's flames. And I think that in itself, just that awareness of, so
Yes.
what makes you come alive, right?
Oof.
And really sitting with that and kind of going, well, and finding, and yeah, we're busy and there's time and there's family and there's all these pressures and finances and all the stuff. But in your day, finding a moment on a regular process-driven kind of approach to literally go, what makes me come alive today? What can I do for 10 minutes that's going to make me feel like I'm coming alive? And start there. And coming alive doesn't, it can be anything. It could be just sitting in your car when you arrive home so that you don't have to see the children right now. You just sit there for 10 minutes and like kind of have those 10 minutes.
Yes.
Or, I always use traffic as an example. People get so caught up in the busyness and the irritation of traffic. Use traffic time to sit and ask, wonderful questions of yourself. Put the
Yes.
radio off, like focus your intentional moment and your mind to kind of go, okay, well, it's going to take me 30 minutes to get home. Let it be my quiet 30 minutes I get home. So it's very practical, very obvious little things that we can start doing to
And intentional.
curate and
Just
intentional.
decide what you want to do.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And now that you're saying just sitting there in a little bit of quiet, just for a few minutes, I find so many of the gentlemen that are speaking to me are afraid of being silent with themselves.
Mm.
It's uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Once they get used to it, they love it. But it is uncomfortable to start. And I want to encourage people, work through that first or the initial discomfort. Do it. You're going to love it. I think maybe sometimes people are scared of what they're going to find if they sit with themselves.
And that's why having a coach like you to kind of sit with them and kind of go, well, let's take 5 minutes. We're going to sit here on this call and let's take 5 minutes with each other.
Yes.
And I'm just going to pose a question to you and say what comes up. right? And you allow the coach to help you and allow them to be a mirror and be a sounding board. That's all you need. That's why coaches are coaches, and that's why we do what we do, because we allow the safe space for you to exist at any level of vulnerability that you want.
Yes,
right?
absolutely. Yes, yes. Oh, so beautifully said. So, one last question. So, people do their thing and they work hard, they reach some goals, and then there's a setback, and it knocks the self-confidence down totally.
Yeah.
What now? What now if somebody is sitting there crushed? What now?
I think we have this fake, and there's so much evidence to prove that this is true, that we have this fake idea that life's supposed to be perfect. Right? And
I know.
like, it's just not.
What do you mean it's not?
It's just not perfect. The what now is how you simply go from the breakdown moment and how quickly you get to, okay, let's get to where we're going next. And very often we get stuck at the breakdown based on the fact that we don't want the breakdown. Right? And the quickest way, I learned this many years ago from a psychologist who said, Kevin, it's radical acceptance. If you radically accept that it is what it is now, then you can go, okay, cool. It is what it is now. How would I like to now go from here and move on? But what we don't do is very often we don't radically accept. But what if, if only this, or maybe I should have said that. Like, it's none of that now. It is what it is. And the quicker we get to radically accepting what it is, it's almost like the weight is lifted and you kind of go, okay, cool. What is my next obvious big action I can take here to get to where I'm going? And I think that's a very big key component of the what next is radically accept that when things are not great, they're not great. And then the next thing is, what are you going to do about it?
Acceptance, because you cannot change what you don't accept and what is not real. Face the reality. This is what it is. No what ifs, maybes, whatevers. This is it. Now decide.
And I would want to end that sentiment with, I've been through this process, and I went and did a walking meditation, and I was walking through the field, and this voice, this realization came to me and said, nothing of great importance is done in haste. So, when things don't work out, you kind of go, okay, to quickly rush my way out of, this thing not working out might get me the wrong result in any case. So let me take the time. Let me sit with that. Let me unpack it. Let me write a pros and cons list. Let me sit with it and not do it in haste. Because if I'm curating this identity, this one that I want to be in the world, hasting your way through it is not the most effective strategy. No. Taking the time with it and sitting with it and speaking through it and speaking to a coach and unpacking that onion to that degree.
Yes.
That is important. And yes, I will share that and leave that. It's
beautiful. It's so well said. And also just a last thought from my side is things are hardly ever as bad or as terrible as you initially think. As soon as that radical acceptance comes, you can see how you kind of can slowly but surely wangle yourself out of it, or make plans, or smooth it over, or start afresh, or start from scratch, whatever the case may be. But my father always says, if it's not sickness or death, it's not really a problem.
Yeah.
I want to ask you one last question. What do you do if somebody comes to you and they're passive aggressive, they're nasty, they're just bitter and awful? How do you deal with that kind of situation? This is just a spur of the moment question. I want just to know, how do you deal with that?
I'm quite strange because, you know, in my work capacity, I am very friendly, and but if randomly I come across someone who's kind of passive aggressive, I immediately ask, and I've learned this as a process already. I immediately ask, what's the intention?
Mm.
Because people's behavior they're just displaying behavior. They are not their behavior.
That's it.
Right? And if we can just get that thinking process right, that people are displaying behavior, they're not their behavior, because no one learns to be like, nobody's born to be a murderer. No one is born to be a racist. No one is born to be an abuser.
Mm.
No one is born that way. What we know is there's an actual intention that drives the behavior. Whether the behavior is good or bad, the point is there's an intention.
Mm.
And immediately when someone shows up in a way that I just don't like, I immediately kind of go, I wonder what your intention is, because if you've just met me or we've had this relationship and suddenly you're showing up that way, I'm going to investigate what's the intention rather than just the behavior, because that's going to serve me in the long run. Because if I just respond negatively, I'm just going to be equalizing like this response with their negative, and it's just negative, and like, ugh, it's bad. It just feels bad. So for my sanity, I look at the
Yes, I
intention.
wanted to say, yes, it's for your own sanity.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I was like, so what is the intention? Is there an intention? And sometimes, depending on the situation, and sometimes I'll just outrightly ask someone, is it your intention to be this rude to me?
Yes.
And they'll look at me and go, oh no. And like,
To which, what can they say? Of course not.
And it immediately gives them an awareness of how they're behaving.
Yes. Yes.
So I think it's far more overlooked than it should be, and it's a really useful strategy, is look at the intention rather than behavior.
Beautiful. I love it. Kevin Britz, it was such a joy to chat to you. I'm going to have your website details in the description so people can know where to get hold of you. Thank you, thank you, thank you. It was a joy.
And thank you. I'm happy to be here, and fantastic conversation. Thanks, Heidi.
Wow.